Aloha Stadium, the part about it that was really interesting is right now it's fixed in football mode, but it used to be a movable stadium, so you could have baseball games or football games there. And so the kind of corners of the stadium kind of moved back and forth on these large air pods, and there were bridges that got raised and lowered in a position to create the circular paths for people. And so I thought that was a really interesting use of a structure. But then what ended up happening was over time, those air pods and the mechanical systems of everything, they just kind of get worn down, and it was taking a lot longer for the stadium to reconfigure itself. So I actually got involved early in my career because when we were starting the work at Aloha Stadium, it was probably like 2005. I had like barely started at WJE, but I did my graduate research on curved bridges, and the bridges at Aloha Stadium are curved. And so, yeah, so when we started working on the project, I was kind of new. People knew what my research was about, and Conrad Paulson came down and said, "Oh, I heard you have some experience with curved bridges. Would you like to help me with the project?" And I said, "Sure." So the very first project that we had there that I worked on was stiffening the bridges. So we actually installed some tension rods to stiffen the bridges because they were on the light side so that they could be moved. You know, they could be a very movable structure. But then what happens is when pedestrians are using them, you can actually excite the natural frequency yourself. So it's kind of like when it's similar to like, I don't know, I say at a mall, but now I'm like dating myself. I'm sure you've been to a mall. So like you go to a mall, like especially at the Mall of America, right? And you're walking on the platforms and you can feel the whole thing kind of vibrate and bounce a little bit. It's not unstable, right? But for a general user that doesn't really know how some of these things are put together, it can feel uncomfortable. Like my parents noticed it when we were at the Mall of America when I was in grad school, and they were like, "This is bouncing around. Shouldn't structures not move?" And so we talked about it. And so it's sort of the same thing with the bridges. People were not comfortable using them. And so they said, well, now that we're not changing to baseball configuration more, we're going to stay in football configuration. We'll put in these rods. So the other thing, so these are kind of like small things that go on with stadiums that like those problems are very specific to Aloha Stadium that we help them solve. But kind of all stadiums have these kind of weird things that are going on because they're built for a very specific purpose.